Hi, fifth graders. The next book I want to read to you in the next 2 weeks, I hope we can get done, is called The Bridge to Terabithia. This is the ultimate book of friendship. And if it would have been a normal school year, we would have had a friendship picnic together. And you guys would have written letters to each other. And we would have shared some presents. Something that we do that's special in fifth grade. And so I wanted to end with this. And it's an amazing book. And in the gift that I sent home today, or that you'll pick up tomorrow, in that folder, it has a book of the most recommended books, and this is on it because it's a very special book. So I'm going to read chapter by chapter for each day, and hopefully we can get through it, and I might have to do it over the weekend. Sorry I've been running late on the daily reading, but I've been really busy. I'm going to read the beginning part of it because of the friendship. Jess and Leslie turned and ran up over the empty fields behind the old Perkins place and down to the dry creek bed that separated the farmland from the woods. There was an old crabapple tree there, and just at the bank of the creek bed from which someone long forgotten had hung a rope. They took turns swinging across the gully on the rope. It was a glorious autumn day, and if you looked up as you swang, it gave you the feeling of floating. Jess leaned back and drank in the rich, clear color of the sky. He was drifting like a fat, white, lazy cloud across the blue. "Do you know what we need?" Leslie called to him. Intoxicated as he was with the heavens, he couldn't imagine needing anything else on earth. "We need a place," she said, "just for us. It would be a secret that we would never tell anyone in the whole world about it." Jess came swinging back and dragged his feet to stop, and she lowered her voice almost to a whisper. "It might be a whole secret country," she continued, "and you and I would be the rulers of it. A place just for us." Chapter 1. This is called Jess Oliver Aarons Jr. Broom, 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 brippity, 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 brippity. Good, his dad had the pickup going. He could get up now. Just slid out of bed and into his overalls. He didn't worry about a shirt, because once he began running, he would be as hot as piping grease, even if the morning air was chill, or shoes, because the bottoms of his feet were by now as tough as the worn-out sneakers. "Where are you going, Jess?" Maybelle lifted herself out sleepily out of the double bed where she and Joyce Ann slept. "Shh," he warned. The walls were thin, and Mama would be mad as flies in a fruit jar if they woke her up at this time of day. He patted Maybelle's hair and yanked the twisted sheet up to her chin. "Just over to the cow field," he whispered. Maybelle smiled and snuggled down under the sheet. "Gonna run?" "Maybe." Of course he was going to run. He had gotten up early every day all summer to run. He figured if he worked at it, and Lord hadn't he worked, he could be the fastest runner in the fifth grade when school opened up. He had to be the fastest, not one of the fastest or next to the fastest, but the fastest and the best. He tiptoed out of the house. The place was so rattly that it screeched whenever you put your foot down. But Jess had found that if you tiptoed, it only gave a low moan. And he could usually get outdoors without waking Mama or Ellie or Brenda or Joyce Ann. Maybelle was another matter. She was going on 7, and she worshipped him, which was okay sometimes. When you were only a boy smashed between 4 sisters, and the older 2 had despised you ever since you stopped letting them dress you up and wheel you around in their rusty old doll carriage, and the littlest one cried if you looked at her cross-eyed. It was nice to have somebody who worshipped you, even if it got unhandy sometimes. He began to trot across the yard. His breath was coming up in little puffs, cold for August, but it was early yet. By noontime, when his mother would have him out working, it would be hot enough. Miss Bessie stared at him sleepily as he crossed across the scrap heap, over the fence and into the cow field. "Moo," she said, looking for all the world like another Maybelle with those big, brown, droopy eyes. "Hey, Miss Bessie," Jess said soothingly. "You just go back to sleep." Miss Bessie strolled over to the greenish patch. Most of the field was brown and dry and yanked up by mouthfuls. "That's a girl. You just eat your breakfast and don't pay me no mind." He always started at the northwest corner of the field, crouched over like the runners you see in the wide world of sports. "Bang," he said, and he took off flying around the cow field. Miss Bessie strolled toward the center, still following him with her droopy eyes and chewing slowly. She didn't look very smart, even for a cow, but she was plenty bright enough to get out of Jess's way. His straw-colored hair flapped hard against his forehead. His arms and legs flew out every which way. He had never learned to run properly, but he was long-legged for a 10-year-old, and no one had more grit than he. Lark Creek Elementary was short on everything, especially athletic equipment, so all of the balls went to the upper grades at recess for lunch, and even if a 5th grader started out the period with a ball, it was sure to be in the hands of a 6th or 7th grader before the half an hour was over. The older boy took the dry center of the upper field for their ball games, while the girls claimed the small top section for hopscotch and jump rope and hanging around talking. So the lower grade boys had started this running thing. They would all line up at the far side of the lower field where it was either muddy or deep, crusty ruts. Earl Watson, who was no good at running but had a big mouth, would yell "bang," and they would race to a line they towed across the other end. And one time last year, Jess had won, not just the first heat, but the whole shebang. Only once. But it had put into his mouth a taste for winning, and ever since he'd been in the 1st grade, he'd been that crazy little kid that draws all the time. But one day, April the 22nd, a drizzly Monday it had been, he ran ahead of them all, the red mud slooching up through the holes in the bottom of his sneakers. For the rest of that day and until after lunch on the next, he had been the fastest kid in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and he was only a 4th grader. On Tuesday, Wayne Pettis had won again as usual, but this year Wayne Pettis would be in the 6th grade, and he played football until Christmas and baseball until June with the rest of the big guys. Anybody had a chance to be the fastest runner, and by Miss Bessie, this year was going to be Jess Oliver Aarons Jr. Jess pumped his arms harder and bent his head for a distance fence. He could hear the 3rd grade boys screaming him on. They would follow him around like country music star. And Maybelle would pop her buttons. Her brother was the fastest, the best. That ought to give the rest of the 1st grade something to chew their cuds on. Even his dad would be proud. Jess rounded the corner. He couldn't keep going quite so fast. He continued running for a while. It would build him up. Maybelle would tell Daddy so it wouldn't look as though he, Jess, was a bragger. Maybe Dad would be so proud he'd forget all about how tired he was from the long drive back and forth to Washington and digging and hauling all day. He would get right down on the floor and wrestle the way they used to. Old Dad would be surprised at how strong he'd gotten in the last couple of years. His body was begging him to quit, but Jess pushed on. He had to let that puny chest of his know who was boss. "Jess," it was Maybelle yelling from the other side of the scrap heap. "Mama says you gotta come in and eat now, leaving the milking till later." Oh, crud. He'd run too long. Now everyone would know he'd been out and started on him. "Yeah, okay." He turned, still running and heading for the scrap heap. Without breaking his rhythm, he climbed over the fence, scrambled across the scrap heap, thumped Maybelle on the head, "Ow!" and trotted on to the house. "Well, look at the old Olympic star," said Ellie, banging 2 cups on the table so that the strong black coffee slushed out, sweating like a knock-kneed mule. Jess pushed his damp hair out of his face and plunked down on the wood bench. He dumped 2 spoonfuls of sugar on his cup and slurped to keep the hot coffee from scalding his mouth. "Oh, Mama, he stinks." Brenda pinched her nose with her pinky crooked delicately. "Make him wash." "Get over here to the sink and wash yourself," his mother said without raising her eyes from the stove. "And step on it. These grits are scorching the bottom of the pot already." "Mama, not again," Brenda whined. Lord, he was tired. There wasn't a muscle in his body that didn't ache. "You heard what Mama said," Ellie yelled back to his back. "I can't stand it, Mama," Brenda said. "Make him go get that smelly self off this bench." Jess put his cheek down on the bare wood of the table. Jesse, his mother was looking now, and put on a shirt. Yes'm, he dragged himself to the sink. The water he flipped on his face and up his arms pricked like ice. His hot skin crawled under the cool drops. Mabel was standing in the kitchen door watching him. Get me a shirt, Mabel. She looked as if her mouth was set to say no, but instead she said, You shouldn't ought to beat me in the head, and went off obediently to fetch his t-shirt. Good old Mabel. Joyce Ann would have been screaming yet from that little tap. 4-year-olds were a pure pain. I got plenty of chores and he's doing around here this morning, his mother announced as they were finishing the grits and red gravy. His mother was from Georgia and still cooked like it. Oh, Mama, Ellie and Brenda squawked in concert. Those girls could get out of work faster than grasshoppers could slip through your fingers. Mama, you promised me and Brenda could go to Millsburg and go school shopping. You ain't got no money for school shopping. Mama, we're just looking around. Lord, he wished Brenda would stop whining so. Christmas, you don't want us to have no fun at all. Any fun? Ellie corrected her primly. Oh, shut up. Ellie ignored her. Miss Timmons is coming by to pick us up. I told Lolly Sunday he said it would be okay. I feel dumb calling her and saying you changed your mind. Oh, all right, but I ain't got no money to give you. Any money, something whispered inside Jess's head. I know, Mama. We'll just take the $5 Daddy promised us. No more than that. What $5? Oh, Mama, you remember? Ellie's voice was sweeter than melted Mars bar. Daddy said last week that we girls were going to have something for school. Oh, take it, Mother said angrily, reaching for her cracked vinyl purse on the shelf above the stove. She counted out 5 wrinkled bills. Mama, Brenda was starting again. Can't we have just one more so that it'll be 3 each? No. Mama, you can't buy nothing with $2.50. Just one little pack of notebook paper is going to up to. No. Ellie got up noisily and began to clear the table. Your turn to wash, Brenda, she said loudly. Ah, Ellie. Ellie jabbed her with a spoon. Jessie saw that look. Brenda shut up her wine halfway out her rose-luster lipstick mouth. She wasn't as smart as Ellie, but even she knew not to push Mama too far, which left Jess to do the work as usual. Mama never sent the babies out to help. Although he worked it right, he could usually get Mabel to do something. He put his head down on the table, and running hadn't done him in this morning. Through his top ear came the sound of the Timon's old Buick. Once oil, his dad would say, and a happy buzz of voices outside the screen doors. Ellie and Brenda squashed in among the 7 Timonses. All right, Jess, get your lazy self off that bench. Miss Beth's bag is probably dragging ground by now, and you still got beans to pick. Lazy? He was the lazy one? He gave his poor dead weight of a head just 1 minute more on the tabletop. Jessie! Okay, Mom, I'm going. It was Mabel who came to tell him in the bean patch that people were moving in the old Perkins place down on the next farm. Jess wiped his hair out of his eyes and squinted. Sure enough, a U-Haul was parked right by the door, one of those big jointed ones. These people had a lot of junk, but they wouldn't last. The Perkins place was one of those ratty old country houses you moved into because you had no decent place to go and moved out as quickly as you could. He thought later how peculiar it was that here was probably the biggest thing in his life, and he shrugged it off as nothing. The flies were buzzing around his sweating face and shoulders, and he dropped the beans in the bucket and swatted with other hands. Give me my shirt, Mabel. The flies were more important than a U-Haul. Mabel jogged to the end of the row and picked up his T-shirt from where had been discarded earlier, and she walked back, holding it with 2 fingers way out in front of her. Ew, it stinks, she said, just as Brenda would have. Shut up, he said, and grabbed the shirt away from her. All right, that's chapter 1. We get our first character, who is Jess, and he is the boy, one of the main character boy. And the next chapter is chapter 2, and that's Leslie. And so I want you, as I read chapter 2 tomorrow, I want you to be thinking about how different the 2 characters are and how their lifestyle is different. Until then, we'll see you later.